Next, please welcome the oral presentation team from the City School, Dubai.
Assalamu alaikum and a very good morning, everyone. My name is Shizak Ashraf.
And my name is Alicia Ali.
And we're going to be representing the City School International Dubai. So tell me, how many of you know what climate change exactly is? Can you please raise your hands? All right, now how many have tried to do something about it? Anyone? You know, when we first hear the stories about climate change, they can be depressing, destructive, and simply quite boring. Yes, we all know that the Earth is heating up way more than it can capacitate, that this very excess heat is melting ice sheets all the way in the polar regions of Greenland and Antarctica. Yes, we also know that climate change presents us our cataclysmic future of ecosystems collapsing, glaciers melting, sea levels rising at a rate at which the Maldives will probably be submerged by water by as near as 2050, tropical diseases far worse than any Ebola or Zika viruses, unbearable heat waves, even higher disaster death tolls. It all stares us right in the eye, ladies and gentlemen, like a big red bus speeding towards us, begging us to take action. But no, we rarely discuss what we can do to help resolve this exponential issue, because apparently, it's not one of our primary concerns. So what are our primary concerns, ladies and gentlemen? Economic growth or industrial progress? Agricultural stability or the generation of energy? Or in today's case, combating climate change. Climate change refers to the rise in global average temperatures, which has led to consequent alterations in weather patterns, the intensity of seasons, the timings of seasons, and a spike in natural disasters. For example, tropical cyclones in the Bay of Bengal or around the Gulf of Mexico. It's going to challenge our entire infrastructure, which we for years have constructed in the most optimum conditions, and now that very system is under threat, ladies and gentlemen. So tell me again, does climate change account as our primary concern yet?
Now, imagine yourself coming home from work on an already stressful day. You come home and your kid tells you to take them to the park. So you step outside under the scorching sun and you realize it is one of the hottest days of the year. And that sure is frustrating, but it is nothing compared to what we're about to experience. In the next 50 years, there will be a global warming challenge in which temperatures will be above 4 degrees Celsius, as was mentioned in the previous slide, which will be a huge threat to our infrastructure and our environment. The kinds of effects climate change poses on us are not just subjective or one-sided. Where there are droughts, there are floods. Where there are heat waves, there are high levels of rainfall, producing a collective streams of disaster heading our way. Talking of extreme heat wave and heat events, they majorly occur due to high nighttime temperatures and low green spaces. And as a matter of fact, they're responsible for far more deaths annually than hurricanes, tornadoes, lightning, or earthquake combined. In 2015, India and Pakistan both faced a collective heat wave in which temperatures rose above 45 degrees Celsius and killed 3,800 people, as reported in the Indian Metropolitan and Pakistan's Dawn News. Contrastingly, the countries situated on the tropics are at high risk because of high level of rainfall, such as the El Nino on the Peruvian coast, which has killed essential fishing villages. Furthermore, the greenhouse effect of melting ice caps and glaciers in polar mountainous regions bring to us equal destructive outcomes. For example, the melting of ice caps in Greenland has increased sea levels that go all the way up to the Indian Ocean and has caused a series of floods that struck Indonesia, Malaysia, and Philippines. According to NASA, our average global sea level over the last century has risen for about 4 to 8 degrees, and that, my friends, is certainly not normal.
Speaking of not normal, we Pakistanis are one of the biggest victims of climate change. Despite our carbon footprint being one of the least in the world at 0.9%, but due to our topographical features of northern mountain glaciers and the corresponding distributaries, we face the harshest preface of what the future holds for us: floods. Flooding during the monsoons in July and August have become the bane of a Pakistani summer, to which thousands of Pakistanis each year lose their homes and livelihood. This also destroys thousands of acres of cultivated land and livestock, immediately decreasing crop yields. In fact, according to the Pakistan Economic Survey, Pakistan lost a total of 3,072 lives, as well as $16 billion to the floods in 2010, 11, and 12. As a result, its agro-based economy has been severely stunted, with the population surging past 300 million by 2050. Now, ladies and gentlemen, read that together with the projected shortage of food, massive flash floods, tropical diseases such as dengue, and an unbearable rise in temperature. Things do not go well for a developing nation like ours.
Food drives the world apart from clean water and is a primary concern of many on this planet, which makes agriculture one of the major industries in this world. Countries like Brazil, who are known as one of the largest agro-based economy in the recent years, have faced a drop in crop yields due to shifting patterns of precipitation and unsuitable high temperatures. So these agro-based recessions also lead to a downfall in trade-related services as exports and imports are eventually stopped, which bring to us a lack of globalization in our economies. Example, the Hurricane Matthew in Haiti took lives of 900 people, left millions displaced and jobless, and also directly impacted the weak infrastructure set by the government.
Too many climate-induced scenarios to die just at once, aren't there? But unfortunately, due to our negligence, it does not get any better. It is apparent that climate change is already having a significant impact on ecosystems, economies, and communities, and now, the most important resource of all, fresh water. Freshwater ecosystems are negatively impacted by climate change due to changes in stream flow and water quality, even with conventional distillation and chlorination. On the other hand, as the Earth warms up, many species are shifting their ranges to areas with more tolerable climate conditions in terms of temperature and precipitation. In fact, 40% of all plants and animals account for this relocation. In an example, almost 314 species of migratory birds flying from the North America across the Indian Ocean to the warmer tropics are affected. Hence, you see, with climate change on the increase and species and their habitats on the decrease, chances for ecosystems to adapt naturally are diminishing, and rapidly.
Now, in all of these various climate change cases, you may ask what the root cause is. And the flashiest of them all is none other than greenhouse gas emissions. We all know what those are, but let's just list them down. There's methane, which comes from landfills, livestock, and natural gas leaks. Then there's nitrous oxide, which comes from agriculture. And next would be hollow carbons, such as CFCs and HFCs, which are found in our refrigerators and air conditioners. They trap heat when they leak out of aging or faulty equipment. Lastly would be carbon dioxide, which is produced when we burn oil, gas, and coal. These gases prevent the infrared radiations released by the Earth, as after absorption, they directly go to the space, which eventually causes high temperatures.
So, after hearing so many climate change instances, you must be wondering, why has nobody ever thought of getting a global agreement on this before? Well, the thing is, they have. Here is an animation produced by the Center for International Climate and Environmental Research in Oslo, which sums up the United Nations' promising yet unfortunately failed attempts at reducing greenhouse gas emissions in the past 2 decades. So in 1992, the UNFCCC was signed by 192 nations to decrease CO2 emissions. In In 1997, the Kyoto Protocol was signed by 193 nations to cut down global warming temperatures to below 2 degrees Celsius. Later on, developed countries realized the significance of fossil fuels and refused to cut down unless the developing countries also cut theirs. The 21st century brought even more dissonance, as developing countries like China and India earn massive revenue through fossil fuels and now refuse to cut down their carbon footprint. Now, the developing nations unite to blame developed nations such as the United States and UK for increasing global carbon footprint to what it is today. Oil-rich countries like Saudi Arabia demanded compensation on cutting down their greenhouse gas emissions. And now, the developed countries have struck a deal with the developing ones by paying them a compensation on cutting down greenhouse gas emissions. And that, ladies and gentlemen, that is where we stand today, with each country being on a different page and blaming one another for climate change instead of collaborating and solving it together. So how do we end this series of disagreement and reach a point where we only think of the future of our children and the environment they'll be growing up in? When and how do we wake up from this passive bystander status and take responsibility for the actions our world suffers? The answer is simple: innovation, collaboration, and improvisation. There are 4 concrete steps towards an environmentally safer and stable future. First, we need to mitigate the problem of climate change. Next, we need to adapt to the present conditions it brings us and implement new technology and finance that new technology. The first step is the implementation of environmental policies by governments. Now, one very simple and effective option introduced by Dr. James Hansen is the fee and dividend policy, better known as the carbon tax. Now, in this, a large fossil fuel consuming country, for example, the United States of America, charges a fee based on the CO2 content of fossil fuels to the fossil fuel companies. This fee is progressive and will raise the price for food and fuel over time. And now that's a bad thing, isn't it? We'll just wait. This collected fee is then paid as dividend to each and every legal citizen to pay for the high-priced fuel, as well as installing alternatives in their homes, such as insulation, energy-efficient lighting, or even hybrid cars. Now that might increase the price of American exports, but trust me on this, every country will be willing to apply the same policy to remain within the trading network. For example, China. So you see, this decreases global carbon footprint far more effectively than any far-sighted UN agreement. Now the second option, and the one that is already widely in action, is the generation of energy through alternative renewable resources. These can include solar power in areas with plenty of sunlight, hydroelectric power plants in areas with high precipitation, windmills along windy coasts, and so on. Biomass can be used by underdeveloped countries who cannot afford advanced technologies, for example, the Central African states. Furthermore, countries may also invest in nuclear energy, which is the largest source of carbon-free electricity. In fact, 1 ton of uranium can produce up to 40 million kilowatt of electricity, and that is equivalent to burning 16,000 tons of coal or 80,000 barrels of oil. So you see, that covers up our energy crisis.
Now, to domestically reduce our carbon footprint, there are a few cheap and easy steps that I'm sure each one of you sitting here would follow for a stable and a sustainable future. Firstly, replacing light bulbs with energy-efficient LEDs, then insulating our homes to decrease the fuel needed for heating, then defrosting refrigerators to decrease the release of halocarbons. And lastly, never ever leave applications on standby. Before I sign off, I'd just like to say one thing. You never know, you might just be stopping a hurricane from destroying somebody's house. So take action now.
So you see, ladies and gentlemen, all of this proves that climate change is an issue that can be tackled like any other if only we collaborate and raise it to all platforms of civil society, community, and government. As we stated before, it is no longer a statistic, but is real and happening right now. As our national poet Allama Muhammad Iqbal once reflectively said, "जो जाने वालों से इबरत हासिल नहीं करता, वो आने वालों के लिए इबरत बन जाता है." Or as Max Dupree said, "We cannot become what we want by remaining who we are." So take action today for your children, for this world we all live in and love, and think about the lives that are affected each day because of our negligence. Because climate change may be tough, but we're tougher. So game on, climate change, we're ready.
Thanks, Nitin. That was some great work. Requesting the remaining participants to please join us. Participants, please note our moderator, Madiha, is sitting on the right side of the stage. She will show you cards and press the buzzer when you exceed the time limit. And in case, if you're not able to understand the question, she will repeat it. Can we please proceed with the question answer session?
All right. Great presentation. I think it was presented. You really made us feel the importance. Is it just wrong with me? Okay. So one of the issues that Pakistan has with climate change is that as a contributor, we are probably not very high with our carbon emissions. But I think as a country, we are at high risk in terms of the risk of climate change affecting us. So what are your solutions in adapting to these different disasters that are looming as a result of climate change?
You know, one of the first issues that we face every year is the flooding during the monsoons. Now that's because Pakistan has only two large dams, Tarbela, Mangla, and these ones. And they're not enough to retain the water that comes from the monsoons each year. So the first step towards at least mitigating one problem is to build more dams up where the river flow is coming higher during the monsoons, so that agricultural land around like Bahawalpur area, that's saved. So first thing, dams. We need to build more dams to decrease flooding. Then we face floods.
Next would be introduce of new technology which will be able to cater the problems, such as like for dams. We can have new technology which will stop the floods and droughts happening in Pakistan.
And plus, we use a lot of chemical fertilizers in our fields, and that's like desertifying a lot of areas in Pakistan. So if like new policies are implemented, how much each farmer gets, then that could mitigate that problem as well. So.
Just a clarification, dams as a hardcore engineering solution, maybe they are advisable, but they are not the only solution. There are a lot of soft solutions available. We can link our natural wetlands to rivers, which would also be good for the ecology, for people. And similarly, it's not just the floods, this is also droughts. So we have to come up with commodities, varieties, seeds, which are drought resistant, consume less water. Okay, quick question. You shared the few developments at the global level, UN negotiations. Two landmark agreements happened in the recent past. You didn't mention them. Are you aware of that? So I would like to know about them.
The Paris Agreement in 2015.
Yeah?
Yeah, the Paris Agreement in 2015.
And then a couple of weeks ago?
Yeah, we had a climate summit, I think, just like recently in Washington.
No, it's at Kigali. So there was a global agreement, it happened like a couple of weeks ago, where the governments agreed to, gradually reduce the consumption and production of hydrofluorocarbons. You mentioned that this is one of the major, greenhouse gas emissions contribution. So this happened like a few weeks ago. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.